Hey there, everybody. Today we are joined by John Kennedy, founder and CEO of Actual AI, an AI platform that helps build high-performing AI native software teams, essentially a co-pilot for engineering managers. Now, Actual is part of Cohort 39 at Alchemist Accelerator, a B2B startup accelerator located in San Francisco, and is also part of the Orange DAO Accelerator. John is a core partner at Underscore VC, a Boston-based venture capital firm, pioneering an open-source investing model backing B2B software founders at pre-seed and seed, and very notably served as a principal product manager and head of product at AWS, and holds degrees from Griffith University in IT and AI. John, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jose.
It's a pleasure having you, truly. So let's get into it. I mean, what is actual AI and why is it so amazing in a lot of ways?
Yeah, so there's so much I could say about this, but I'm going to try and condense it down. There is a revolution coming to software development. Even just yesterday, we went along to a session of vibe coding, and that is such a deep and interesting topic right now, how you effectively build software with AI. And there's so many people working on that. But there's no one really thinking about how to kind of enable the software engineering manager. And so, we want to become that buddy to the software engineering manager in just the same way as Cursor is to software developers, and really serve all of their functions, from planning to reporting to coaching to hiring, firing to promoting. All of those things are part of the remit for a software engineering manager, and we know we can make them, we can kind of 10x their productivity in the same way that Cursor would for software developers.
Interesting. So what sort of teams are you working with right now?
Yeah, across the spectrum. So we've got lots of startups working with us. They can kind of onboard in 10 minutes, so it's really easy for them. And they use us just by looking at we do really good summaries of software development. So if they want to look at us before they step into their stand-up or a one-on-one or a weekly meeting, it's really easy to get an understanding of what the team's doing and kind of relative velocity between different teams or people on your team. And so for startups, it really kind of shortcuts the context switching you have to do as a founder or a CTO, really understanding what the work is. You don't need to dive into GitHub or dive into Jira. You can really just see it in one place. For larger companies, the large companies that we're working with multiple companies over 50 developers, and one right now, that's 130 developers. For them, it's really being able to get a picture of the whole organization and see what's being built all over the organization, relative velocities, understanding the impact of AI native development on different departments and different teams, understanding the impact of building greenfield versus brownfield, understanding all of that information in one place. So instead of having to go into various different systems, they go to one place. And the data that we've got that no one has ever had before, we've got summaries, and those summaries, we've spent a long time building a pipeline to really understand in plain English what developers are building. And then we also have this kind of idea of relative velocity. And that's essentially taking the idea that we would have had in the past of, taking code to a developer who reviews the code and says, well, this is the kind of complexity, novelty, quality of the code, and taking that process and using an LLM. And by reviewing all the code that comes in, you can get this really holistic picture of the kind of relative effort complexity, as well as what is being built. And that's so useful to engineering managers, but also VPs of engineering and CTOs.
100%. So it seems like you're basically trying to surface a lot of the issues much faster, right? And then beyond that, you're also trying to surface the high performers on a team.
Yeah. We love to talk about the hidden superstars. We know that a software developer's role is really kind of on screen all day and is less focused on communication. I know that when the first time I founded a company 15 years ago, I was the CTO, I was buried in code. Literally for 3 months, I was kind of in a basement, just coding, sleeping, and eating. And by the end of that period, I had no small talk. I really couldn't talk to people. And that's not every software developer, but I think it's a reflection of the fact that it's a very a very kind of introverted role. The role itself is very much in code, and what we find is that developers are at the worst of their own PR. And so teams often have developers who are brilliant and are keystones to the team, but they really don't talk about themselves very much or self promote. And the funny thing is that, if you look at traditional performance management processes, they're heavily reliant on self-promotion. And so you often miss your kind of hidden superstars. In fact, one of the companies with 70 developers that brought us on, the next day they promoted one of their software developers, because they found out just how productive that person was, and we're able to see that in a report and go, wow, we need to keep this person, promote them, pay them more, recognize them in the team. So
Right.
that's kind of one of the superpowers that engineering managers get by picking up the tool.
Right. So, I mean, it sounds like actual AI it really empowers engineering managers to see everything much more clearly than they would otherwise because they don't have to spend so much time in reporting and in the actual code if they are at all, on one-on-one. So, I guess the question, because there's a lot to unpack here. You said AI native development. I'd love to unpack what that actually means for those of you out there who don't understand what that wave of revolution is actually greenfield versus brownfield. And then at the same time, it's really interesting the idea that actual can adapt from small startup teams to large 130 plus engineering teams, which are vastly different organizational structures and
Yeah,
complexity.
absolutely. That was a lot of questions.
Yeah,
Let's
I
step through
mean,
those. So,
go.
the way we think about AI native development is evolving rapidly. When I, built the prototype myself back, between January and March 2024, I was using Copilot, and I felt like at the time I was getting, 2 to 3x productivity just using Copilot. But
Yeah.
what we've seen since then is such a rise in a more integrated experience. And so, the advent of Cursor and Windsurf on the kind of IDE side, where now instead of just having like tab completions, you have a fully integrated conversational experience where you're having a conversation with your code base, and it can do things like see linter errors and correct them before it even asks you for a view on code. On code development, that was a huge revolution for us. Like midway through last year, we were transitioning into that type of AI native development. But since then, and certainly recently, we've seen people go even deeper about how you use end to end, how you use AI through the software development process. Can you have a really deep technical conversation with an AI that then creates a business requirements document that then you can use to derive a product requirements document, a PRD that then you can use to derive a checklist of items, and then break those down into kind of one story point items, and then take that checklist and put it into a file in the code base so that your AI can actually go through step by step and execute these for you like a buddy, like an agent, like a co-pilot. And that evolution has just led to a couple of things. One is, this kind of 100x potential, and where if you're doing a greenfield project, you can go to from zero to application in a couple of days, where it may have taken a couple of months before. But also,
Right.
this more kind of systematic process means that you can now take on both larger projects, but also take on existing projects that you might consider brownfield applications, and actually very systematically take over the development with AI in a way that was harder when you were using Copilot or even earlier iterations of Cursor, where you might not have the whole context of the code base, and you might not have done things like putting in design documents into the code base so that the AI understood the intent of the application and kind of the holistic purpose of new features coming in.
Right. Wow. So again, so much to unpack there. Let's actually talk about the evolution of the software development role then, because it sounds like things are changing fast, especially over the past 12 to 24 months. Now, what do you see happening for software development over the next 12 to 24 months in terms of greenfield, brownfield projects? What does that mean for engineering managers too?
Yeah, we're already seeing the antibodies kind of pop out. People hear about vibe coding, and there's immediate resistance because people hear low quality, and they hear, unconsidered and lack of design and these kinds of things. And that's kind of that's this kind of reaction that, people in medium-sized to large companies are having towards this idea that the job is changing pretty rapidly. And I don't think it's, I think it's quite honestly, people are worried about what that looks like and how they maintain code standards. What we're seeing though is that you can actually kind of have your cake and eat it too if you take the time. So there's a big transition to be made for people actually diving into what it means to develop using an AI native process, not just an agent, but the process. And as that matures, that process, I think we're going to see a big change in the role of the software developer in every type of company. We were talking before about the difference between startups and mid-sized companies. We see a lot of commonality between what a software engineer does at a mid-sized company or a larger company and what a founder or founding CTO has to do early stage at a startup. And so there's a lot of parallels between those roles and what they have to do. And the process as it evolves is going to allow larger and larger teams to take on native AI development processes, but we expect that there'll be a very uneven distribution of this technology, as some larger companies just can't move quickly in terms of compliance, security, standards. A lot of the people in the organization don't want to change their methodologies and how they're building and their role, but there's going to be companies who come up really quickly because they're able to innovate 10x faster, and those are the ones that take on the new AI software development processes, and that
Right.
will look like still a very systematic approach to software development, but definitely a change in the role of the software developer, where they're doing much more code review and they're thinking about architecture, and the way that you train junior developers is less about learning syntax of languages and more about kind of ironically traditional data, computer science topics like data modeling and software architecture, where you're getting them to become, you've got to get them into those areas that the senior developer may have managed up until now earlier, because they're able to guide an AI and have kind of an AI buddy that works with them, essentially pair programming in a code base. So those topics become even more important, so that your more junior engineers can guide an agent that's rapidly developing your code base in a high quality type way that's maintainable and sustainable.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so definitely changing the role of software developers more towards code review and understanding what's going on rapidly as the AI generates code, but also more junior engineers, leaning into those kind of bigger topics and maturing in different ways earlier, so that they can guide agents. And that obviously leads to a very different role for the software engineering manager, as well, as they still continue kind of the broad categories of what they're doing, mentoring and reporting, and managing the way that they have to do those, and the way that they think about building their team and shape of the team and size of the team change pretty dramatically as well.
Amazing. So how does that change? It doesn't mean that they actually do have to lay off a certain amount of the current workforce at larger companies. Is it that they're going to end up lagging behind, and then small startups are going to end up disrupting simply because of engineering speed? I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, larger companies take longer to make business cases than startups and small companies. So what's happening at the moment is definitely there's lots of layoffs, and there are lots of maybe not official hiring freezes, but companies aren't hiring at the rate that they were before for software developers. What I think we'll see is not a contraction of the number of software developers that you have, but actually an increase of the use cases for software. So what teams will eventually, will be doing is building for more niche use cases. So, all of those kind of use cases that just were not going to be viable in the past, because you would need too many developers over, too long a period of time to actually make some particular business profitable, either for a large company or a startup. They're now going to become viable. You can do them with smaller teams, which means that the companies are going to be, adjusting their teams to be smaller. So you'll probably have pods, one back end, one front end, one AI kind of working together to build the kind of the new version of what we've seen of SaaS, which is an AI pipeline generating new data, presenting it within a SaaS tool. You can definitely have smaller pods building those types of applications, but as we see more new niche use cases become viable, larger companies will start booting up more pods to be able to address them specifically, and more startups will pop up to address those niche use cases as well. So, rather than a contraction of kind of the number of software developers we see in the market, I think we're going through an adjustment. So right now, there's layoffs and people are coming off large projects that in the past have needed very large teams, and you need less developers for those kinds of projects, but those developers will go on to build new things as large companies are able to build business cases to build those niche projects, and startups are able to as well kind of get funding to build those niche use cases as well.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So, wow. So in terms of safety, because I know there are software engineers in my network. When I was more of a software engineer, I would have been worried about what I'm hearing right now from you. So I know I have to ask, like, what do you think software engineers should do over the next 12 months to succeed?
Yeah, software engineers should do over the next 12 months to succeed. Yeah. So, listening to I think I'd said it before, but listening to a presentation on the cutting edge of vibe coding yesterday, there were some really good keys for software developers. So, Kevin from Pioneer Square Labs has a whole YouTube channel now that's getting excellent subscribership of developers checking out how he's building software with AI. And I think the best thing a software developer could do kind of similarly to in the past, if you want to be a great software developer, build your own projects, put them up on GitHub and have people contribute to open source. I think that's true now, but the kind of twist is learn how to do that with AI, because the best thing on your, when you're talking to potentially hiring managers to explain how you're able to leverage AI to go faster and how you're on the cutting edge of AI driven software development. Companies right now are struggling to understand how to get there, how to transition. And if you're a software developer that understands the new way to build, you can bring that to companies, and that's going to be a huge advantage to VPs of engineering, software development managers who want to evolve their team, is to actually bring in developers who already get it and going to already bring those processes and bring best practice and bring new ideas. And help their team evolve.
Right. So become pioneers of these software, of these AI architectures, essentially.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's super fun. Anyone who's built software in the past and has stopped being a developer, yeah, I think I've spoken to dozens of people now who jump on the kind of vibe coding bandwagon because it's just so much fun. Like any project you ever wanted to build is now so fast to build. I've gone back and built little things just because it's fun. And so, I think the thing here is that there's so much free content out there. I guess like 6 to 9 months ago, we saw this thing pop up called Cursor Casts that became another kind of channel full of content about how to build with AI. But there's tons of these now, and you can jump on to YouTube or do searches and find tutorials about how to build with Cursor and how to build with other tools like Windsurf and Lovable and Bolt.new and, and just go so fast. And that's really the key is curiosity. Being curious, understanding how to use the tools, understanding new processes. It's not hard to innovate at the moment because it's so much greenfield territory to cover. How do you induce this super intelligent agent to build good software? There's just so many ways to peel that mandarin. That's a weird
Right.
analogy, but yeah.
Exactly. So this is a really fascinating topic because it seems to me like if the cost of developing software, or at least just MVPs, things that actually hit product market fit faster, because experts are now empowered by vibe coding to create their own MVPs and just put it out there, then what does that mean for actual AI for them? Because they're going to be managing engineering processes for the first time.
Yeah. I think we think about the progress of our company in 3 stages. And I actually do want us to come up with a better name than vibe coding, because vibe coding feels like something you do, like on the weekends for fun, which it is, and people do. But I think there's a better name for kind of AI-driven software development we've got to come up with, and that's going to be catchy. We'll work it out. It's okay. But, the way that we think about our company evolving is today we have a fantastic AI pipeline that processes a bunch of data and gives you that data back in a dashboard that you can, use as a software development manager, as a VP of engineering. The next stage is where we have an agent, and that agent starts to take a lot of actions for you, and you're probably giving that agent permission to do some things, and some things that other things it just does. And you still have that dashboard with all the information there about what it's doing. And then eventually you get to the place where the agents become kind of cliche to say more like employees, but it's something like that, where you don't need a dashboard as much because they're acting very independently. I think we're still a little way off from that. I think people are going to want that dashboard and visibility for a long time, where they can see, the tasks the agents are performing and the data from across the organization. As there is this avalanche of code, coming because of all of the kind of AI-driven development, more and more you will need engineering management to understand what's going on, to make sure that it's aligned with business priorities, and to manage both the humans and the agents that are writing code for you. So, we definitely see an evolution of actual AI where we can help you manage the Devons of the world, but also the coding model right now is more, the software development process right now is more like one-to-one. You've got one developer working in Cursor with an agent, or maybe with a Devon, and that probably expands out where senior software developers maybe work with 3 Devons, and Devons are, executing on user stories and doing task breakdowns and going and creating prototypes. But even then, you still got software developers on this side, and understanding how they are building and all of the summaries of work is really valuable to have as an external tool that can kind of look as a third party and sense check this and help determine priorities. The whole thing, I think the value in software developers, there's still this huge amount of value where they're interpreting business requirements and turning them into architectures. And all of that process still requires, oversight and summarization and reporting and all these kinds of things. So all the capabilities we're building are still absolutely relevant in this world where we go faster and faster and faster and transition from kind of completion to one to one to one to many agents. We're building towards that future, and it's still will absolutely need engineering management.
Again, it seems like every time you give us an answer, there's just so much to unpack, so much to talk about. Okay, so it sounds like actual AI has a real use for people who are vibe coding to their first step in having their own venture, let's say. But then the growth potential of actual AI thereafter is also incredible. It's vast because the engineering the scope of engineering is going to multiply or tenfold, hundredfold because of generative AI, because of all these new potential features. Are you still there?
I'm here, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it's going to multiply. So you do need more engineering managers. You do need more engineering oversight. Now, I guess the question becomes, how do you start to integrate these kind of compliance concerns? Because like you said earlier in the conversation, a lot of these larger companies are concerned or slowed down by regulations essentially. So
Yeah.
how does that fit into, let's say, a growing engineering manager's repertoire?
Yeah. Look, we love the startups that use us, and we think we provide great value for those startups. So they don't have to do as much. The founders don't have to do as much context switching, and certainly, startups that are AI first are going to have an avalanche of code, and so making that more manageable, understanding what's going on in delivery is a really good value for those startups. Where we really fly, though, is organizations of over 50 developers, and I think we provide lots of value below that. Problem is exponential. As you have more developers or more agents, that's kind of exponential complexity of communication and coordination. And so, when we get over 50 developers, we know that it's really hard for a VP of engineering or a CTO to have visibility over the ground level of what's going on and what's being built. And that's kind of really where we come into our own. And, we were talking before about how code review is going to become a lot more important. I mean, that's the core of our business. We've built an AI pipeline that does code review. And so you can imagine how that increases the efficacy of software developers, of engineering managers, etc. I think what we'll see is as companies want to make the jump, medium-sized, large companies want to make the jump to AI native code development, is both a need for more code review, but also looking at the processes they use and relative velocities between different projects they have. It's going to be even more important to measure. I think for medium to large size companies, as you were saying, compliance and security is really important. And so we have a couple of approaches that, obviously our SaaS getting SOC 2, we're doing that. That's table stakes. We have very high security measures, around, all of the data that comes in. We don't store any code. We only store summaries within the SaaS. And so, we give a lot of security to everyone onboarding the SaaS, but we also have another approach. This came from companies that I've worked in. Acquia was a company that I was product director at, and we had this approach. And then I was at AWS, and obviously AWS has a lot to do with how, security and how you deploy into various VPCs of customers.
Right.
Well, with actual AI, we can deploy inside a customer security boundary. So within their virtual private cloud on AWS, Azure, and GCP, we even have an approach to deploy on-prem if needs be. And that gives larger companies the security they need because none of the processing actually leaves their security boundary. So we can make use of kind of native inference services like Bedrock within AWS and others within the other clouds. And we can even run inference independently if we need to. This is a model that I expect to see more and more for AI companies that are processing the kind of the crown jewels of IP for every software company, is you need to be able to deploy within their security boundary to give them the security that they need.
So let's say we establish our security, we establish that the compliance and regulations, everything's 100% as it should be, as they would like it to be. That's hypothetically speaking. Now, what would be the next step there then? Where's actual AI going in terms of empowering the actual engineering teams and not just the engineering managers?
Yeah.
So making it more like closed circle.
I was having a conversation with a CTO not so long ago who'd been at Google, and he was like, I'm so excited to be at this startup. This startup is definitely mid-stage. I think they're doing, in the hundreds of millions of revenue at this point. He's like, right now, I only have to spend 2 months a year doing performance review at Google, like, because he's the CTO at Google. We would spend 6 months of the year doing performance reviews.
Oh.
I think the steps for an organization right now. Sorry, I just lost that thread. Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, so the idea is okay, so actual AI, it establishes these safety boundaries. So then enterprise level teams can actually move fast and managers aren't spending 6 months and doing performance reviews. What does it look like then for an engineering team in terms of like empowering the team with additional AI workflows, systems, tools that feedback into the engineering manager? So what's the step beyond the engineering manager?
Yeah. So, we know that some engineering managers today spend 6 hours of their day in Slack and GitHub and Jira, or, a different issue system, although over half of software companies are using Jira. And they have to kind of skip between these systems that weren't built for them, aren't, fit for their purpose. They've kind of bring the data all together from all these systems. They're doing a lot of email and meetings. And so there's a lot of data out there that we can process really effectively. So we're thinking about more work artifacts we can bring in, like design documents. We're thinking of more systems we can plug into to bring more data to make the engineering manager's life easier and easier and go faster and faster. So there's definitely more integrations that we're going to bring in over time, but also just addressing all of those capabilities we were talking about before, like planning and reporting and promoting. And then hiring processes as well. As we gather more data, we can make engineering managers more and more effective and help them in all of those task areas and become really the buddy, the agent for the engineering manager. And that's, right. And go to desktop and make it a tool they can just access with a hotkey and get even better at all of these tasks. One big element we've been talking about for a long time is feedback. Feedback has been a problem in the past for software teams because it's really hard to get candid feedback from people. We actually have a new system of gathering feedback that can really enrich all of the process that we're going through to kind of up-level teams into AI native software development. We can make the guarantee that no human reads your feedback, because essentially we're taking all the feedback into our AI system that processes it and can give coaching to developers based on that feedback. There's capabilities that we're building that make the engineering manager more and more effective. And as larger organizations move into AI native development, they'll need these more and more because there's a lot more for an engineering manager to do to kind of manage this avalanche of code coming and change. But we definitely see ourselves scaling up to all of the processes that large organizations need and helping those large organizations move fast through this transition, kind of the revolution of code development and how it will change with AI. And we're certainly right now kind of targeting that 50 to 300 developer range, and we'll go even larger from there. We're talking to some very large companies right now about how we can help them go through that transition.
Amazing. Amazing. So we're nearly at time. So if you don't mind, just one more question. So what's exciting to you about the next about 5 to 10 years, and what do you see, not just for yourself, but for software development, for startups, for the space in general? Because it seems like this is going to be a revolution.
Yeah. The exciting thing for me is that I don't think we should be measuring it in 5 to 10 years anymore. I think we should be measuring in two-year increments, because we have no idea what's over the horizon at the 2-year point right now. I think that with the technology we have today, just the LLM technology we have today, the world could look completely different. We could go from using the internet to talking to our personal agent, just as how we do, how we run most of our lives. And that's just with the tech we have today. So like the thing I'm excited about is how the world can evolve in these very short increments, and how we can provide benefit to everyone in the world, but also just the possibilities that are opening up because of this rate of change. Because finally, we have the hardware to unlock these theories that we've had for a long time about how well machines can emulate our own process as humans, and the kind of expanse of tasks that we can unlock because of that.
Right. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, it sounds like it doesn't have to take forever to change the world anymore.
Absolutely. I think someone with, a half decent laptop can spend time on YouTube and do something new and different that no one's ever done before, because the tools are cheap. You can get like a subscription to Cursor for $20 a month, which is ridiculous. Like, if you actually think about that, if you told a software developer 5 years ago they would have access to something that would just like generate code through a conversation to them for $20 a month, it's insane. Like, the possibilities right now are endless. I really believe in the kind of advent of one-person startups as well. We're definitely seeing an uptick in solo founders, but you can run so much of an organization so much faster now. Kind of all the I'm seeing it as a founder, all of these kind of hygiene factors of a startup, it's just so much faster to do those things. So there's the possibility that individual founders can go after really niche areas and just own that area in the world and make it way better, on that really particular functionality for everyone, and make that a business and, make it really viable for them, and maybe not even go and get funding, just run that. And that's a possibility for someone just like with a laptop who has a couple of months, to get that bootstrapped. That's a possibility now. So that's super exciting.
It's exciting for everybody, for engineering managers, for software engineers, for people who want to start something. So, John, I really appreciate you taking the time today. It has been among the most fascinating conversations I've had, truly. And I hope this is just the first of many.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.